In the last lecture module, I gave you an overview of the course of the lecture and how it related to the chapter. We then considered that Socratic quote and talked about Rachel's project of formulating that minimum conception of morality. In this module, we want to turn our attention to Rachel's methodology and go through at least one of these three cases. Rachel adopts a case-based method. He goes through and looks at some real-world cases, and in doing so, he's going to state the facts of the case. This is what the world is like. And he's going to articulate a question. Here is what is at stake or being debated morally. Then he'll give some arguments that give an affirmative answer to that question, and he'll give one or more arguments that give a negative answer to that question. After each argument, he'll provide us with an assessment, how he understands the efficacy of that argument. Was it a good argument? Was it a bad argument? Specifically, was it sound, having true premises in good logical form, or was it unsound, having either bad logical form or false premises? The three cases that he wants to look at then are as follows. Our first example will be Baby Teresa, a case from 1992. When we examine Baby Teresa, we'll talk about the facts, we'll articulate that question, and then we'll look at three different arguments. The benefits argument, the argument that we should not use people as a means, and the argument from the wrongness of killing. In our second case, we'll consider the case from 2000 of Jody and Mary. We'll look at two arguments, the argument that we should save as many as we can, and the argument from the sanctity of human life. In the third example, we'll look at the case of Tracy Latimer from 1993. Here, we'll state the facts of the case, then we'll look at the argument from mercy, the argument from the wrongness of discriminating against the handicapped, and the slippery slope argument. Let's shift our focus then to the case of Baby Teresa. Now, I have to warn you that these are all tragic cases. They're very disheartening and sad. They're heartrending, but they're the cases that Rachel has chosen, and so we have to look at them. Baby Teresa was born with encephaly. Encephaly is a developmental disorder. There are very few cases in which the fetus actually makes it to term. When fetuses do make it to term, important parts of their brain is missing, especially the cerebellum and the cerebrum, but also related body parts such as the skull and the scalp are missing. They have a brainstem, that is the part of the brain that regulates metabolic functions. So these babies, if they make it to birth and are alive, can usually breathe and have a heartbeat. However, their prognosis is almost without exception absolutely awful. They never live more than a few days. The reason their prognosis is so terrible is because encephaly is a gestational birth defect that is part of a class of birth defects called neural tube defects. Now, neural tube defects are some of the most common birth defects. They are estimated to affect about 300,000 births worldwide. In neural tube defects, the embryonic cells that normally develop into the brain and the nervous system do not properly develop during gestation. Thus, the embryos don't develop a complete or properly functioning nervous system. Now, each year in the United States, most encephaly cases are detected during early pregnancy, and parents are very often going to choose to abort these fetuses. Of those fetuses that are taken to term, about half are stillborn. The remaining fetuses taken to term, about 350 cases a year in the United States, are born biologically alive, though they die, usually within a couple of days. Current scientific theory about encephaly is that encephalites are blind and they are unconscious. There's really nothing that can be done to improve or to extend their lives. So Baby Teresa, Rachel tells us, was never conscious. She never exhibited any signs of being conscious, and she would die soon. That's the prognosis for encephalitics like Baby Teresa. Teresa's parents wanted to allow Baby Teresa's organs to be transplanted so that she could be an organ donor and thereby save other babies. However, her organs were going to deteriorate too much to be viable transplant organs if the doctors waited for Teresa to actually have her biological or natural death. As a result, in order to harvest the organs, Baby Teresa would have to actually be killed biologically, even though mentally she isn't conscious. She doesn't hear, she doesn't see, she doesn't have feelings or desires or hopes or so on. She is in fact missing most of her brain. So our case facts then are pretty gruesome but straightforward. She's born with encephaly. She's never conscious, and she's going to die soon. Her parents want to allow organ donation. Her organs would deteriorate too much if doctors waited for her biologically natural death. And so Rachel poses the following case question. Should Teresa be killed so that her organs could save others? Let's finish off this module by considering the first of the three arguments that Rachel talks about. In this case, it's an argument for biologically ending baby Teresa's life and harvesting her organs in order to use them for transplants in other children. Rachel calls this the benefits argument. And the benefits argument goes roughly as follows. We start off with a general principle about how we ought to behave. If we can benefit someone without harming anyone else, then we ought to do so. We add a statement about baby Teresa's existence, both her current and any potential changes to it. So life without consciousness, feelings, and social connections. And in fact, without it ever being possible to be conscious, have feelings, or get social connections is not a benefit, and hence depriving one of it is not a harm. Transplanting the organs would benefit the other children, therefore, without harming baby Teresa. Our conclusion, we ought to transplant those organs. So Rachel presents us with this argument on the third page there, and then he gives us an evaluation of the argument. He thinks that the argument is sound. It has true premises, and those premises, if they are true, guarantee the truth of the conclusion. And so he says that harvesting Teresa's organs does not harm her, since mere biological existence has no value, but it does create benefit for these other babies, and hence it is the right thing to do. In the next lecture module, we'll look at the final two arguments that Rachel considers in the baby Teresa case. Both of these arguments are against the idea of harvesting baby Teresa's organs.